Hi, everyone. My name is Janita Swenson, and I'm with Heart of the Customer. I am the Marketing Strategy Director here. And today we are really excited to be part of the SMB Summit, Virtual Summit today. I have Jim Tincher as well here. We're going to be interviewing him. He's the founder and CEO of Heart of the Customer. Jim, do you want to say a couple words about yourself?
Sure. I started out in small business and then worked with Best Buy and United Health Group, where I built customer experience programs. I started the company 7 years ago, really around building excellence in customer experience. And that's what we're going to talk about today is really from a B2B perspective, although it also applies to B2C, how you can build a great experience to come out of the recession as strongly as possible.
Yes, this COVID-19 has been incredibly disruptive in our everyday lives, both personally and professionally. It's made us really think about how do our customers experience us and know and learn about us a little bit more. You've talked and mentioned before in other articles and things that you've said that loyalty is more important than ever. But you also had a conflicting talk about how we want to segment out our customers a little bit more to be to talk about more the cream of the crop and kind of ignore other ones. Is that kind of the messaging that you're talking about, or something different?
I wouldn't go to ignore, but yeah, I would just really talk about coming out of the recession as we really actually enter it and then come out of it. What's going to be critical is really following a three-step approach, which is A, segment your customers so that you understand who are the most valuable. We'll go more into detail to that. B, learn as much about them as you can. And then C, rethink your experience to make it dramatically different for these best of the best.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of airlines kind of do that right now, actually. The platinums get the better seats and they get to board first. Is this just a consumer approach, or is this bigger than that?
Well, it has been used quite often with consumers, no doubt about it. And it's something that some B2B firms do, but not enough. And I'm going to use B2B off an example here because it's less intuitive, but it can also apply to B2C. So let's start with that whole segmenting your customers first. And what do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. Now, every customer is important, no question about it. But some are more important than others. That can be hard for some of your teammates to hear, some of your employees, because they want to service every customer the best. But if you treat every customer the best, you're actually treating every customer as average. And some of your customers simply aren't average. And that's this first step, is let's spend some time understanding who are our most important customers. Now, the way that's traditionally done is straight through revenue. And by looking and say who drives the most revenue, let's go ahead. We have the top revenue at top, medium, and bottom. And that can work. But what we find actually is that margin is far more predictable and more important, because you may be giving such price concessions to the top customers that you can't afford to treat them differently. You really want to look at more from a margin, whether that's unit margin or overall margin, and use that to segment your customers. One of our clients did this, and they found that from a revenue perspective, it was your standard 80-20 or Pareto rule. 80% of the revenue came from 20% of the customers. But when they looked and set up margin, they found that 80% of the revenue, 80% of the margin came from 5% of the customers. And they weren't entirely within that 20% of the highest revenue. And it was really eye-opening for them to understand that, oh, there's something happening here, that some of our customers just responsible for so much more margin that it surprised them. So that's the first thing, is to work with finance and look at the best you can get as far as profitability, or at least unit margin and overall margin, and use that to segment your customers and come up with a top segment of maybe 5%. Then you want to have a middle tier and a bottom tier, but let's focus on this top 5%. Now, when you do this, you'll likely find that there's some names missing. You know, we worked with a health benefits company, and they did this work, and they were surprised that some of their biggest clients, specifically from revenue, weren't there on the margin side. Others weren't on either list, but they thought they should be. Big Fortune 50 companies weren't in the top 5%, and it surprised them. And so the first thing is that to pour through and try to understand who is this top 5%, and 5% is a round number, that is dramatically different. Okay. And so then what you want to do next is just say who's missing from the list. And so you might end up with 50 customers in the top 5%, and say you have 1,000 customers, 50% of the top, and you look at that and say, well, if we really want to identify these, understand them, and create a different experience, there's these other 12 that we got to include. That's fine. You just want to say, here's another 50 we'll have to include, but you want to have a small number, around 5% of clients say these are the people that we are going to retain. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that these are our customers 2 years from now. Knowing that by doing that, you're actually going to help the other 95% as well.
That makes sense. I mean, you're right. We want to treat everybody well. And I mean, as an organization, we want to treat everybody well, but it makes sense, especially now where a lot of organizations have limited resources. We have to be more focused and deliberate on the client base that you want to keep and retain, and the ones that are profitable. You want to make those ones have the best experience possible. So what do you do next? What do you do after we've identified these segments? What's the next step? It's
not to jump to action. The next step is try to identify what separates these from the rest and what do they need. And so when we worked at this health benefits company, we created a program called Hug Your Customers, which is very visible inside. Everybody said, okay, we're going to hug our customers. We understand that. We weren't quite thoughtful enough because that language escaped to the outside. And so when somebody called up and said, hey, we're doing Hug Your Customers, can we come hug you? Yeah, we're Minnesotans. We don't hug. So that was, especially not now, we don't hug. And so we had to rename it to Collecting Best Practices, saying, hey, you're really doing things the best. We want to learn from you. But it's now let's learn everything we can. Let's try to understand what are their needs. If we're going to say that we're going to retain these, we need to understand what's important to them. And so by identifying these top 5%, let's do a few things. First of all, let's go out and visit them. And that's the first thing we did is we went out and we said, okay, what is it about these that they're generating more margin than everybody else? What's happening there? Are they using us more frequently? Are they using us differently? What's going on? Are they just big? But it wasn't usually just big. And whenever we've done this, bigness is a factor. You know, our $1 million company is probably not going to be anybody's top 5%, whereas, Target would be. But so let's go out and let's say at the top 5%, what makes them unique and different? And what unique and different needs do they have that don't reflect the other 95%? And so other ways to do that, first of all, go out and visit them. I can't do that now, but once the travel restrictions are gone, go out there, visit them. Also look at your surveys. And what we've commonly find is that when you look at your survey results based on tier, they're upside down. The reason is these top customers are often more demanding. They're giving you a lot more margin. They expect more, but by using an undifferentiated service model, they're actually giving you the lowest scores because they have higher expectations and the performance is the same as everybody else, or maybe even lower because they're more complex. And so start looking at the survey scores and see, do you have what you want, which is the top customers, the top scores and on down? Often that's not the case. So learn if that's true. And look and see what's different in scores. Where are they different? So that you can use that to isolate what you need to do differently. And then thirdly, and this will be controversial, you want to take your executives and each assign them a customer or 2 or 3. And so if you have 50 best customers, you have 10 executives, give each one 5 accounts. Say, all right, you are now responsible for ABC company's retention and their growth. If they're not growing, that's on your performance review. Now, that's hard, especially when you think about a CFO, VP of finance, but you know what? They have a lot to do with the customer experience. And if they're sitting in their back office, they're making decisions without really understanding how those play out for your customers. And so start assigning that each executive owns a handful of accounts. You don't replace your sales reps. They're there as an addition to the account team, but it's on their review. Get together once a year and say, what have we learned from our customers? And hey, Sam, hey, Julie, you each lost one of your top 5 customers. What are you doing to make sure that never happens again? You drive a very different response by having that responsibility. I can see it also driving a lot of empathy too. Like being the CFO gets firsthand experience with, with the 4 or 5 people that are contacted at that one account. He's really going to understand and have more an influence as to how his company drives and how he's reflecting and always putting that customer as like, I'm going to make this big initiative, but did I think about what the customer would want? I think that's a extremely beneficial expectation that they would actually understand what their customers need and act upon that. Definitely. It drives very different conversations. So now we get done with that. What do we do about it? And that's really the key part. This all comes down to just segmenting customers is nice. Looking at the scores, learning about them is nice and good, but it really comes down to action. Okay. What do we do differently? And that's what should be the outcome of step 2 is we've identified that these most important customers, this is what they need. And it's often different from what the others need. They may be more interested in collaboration and joint innovation. We've often seen that in the manufacturing side, is that the best customers actually have the resources and the desire to co-create with you. So great, let's look at that. Maybe you give them, if you bring together operations here to think about what you can offer that's differently. Right now, what you're likely doing is you're just offering services to whoever asks for it. And so you may be doing co-creation to some small client that really not going to see the benefit out of. Wouldn't it be better to take those resources, go visit your best clients and say, hey, we've got these innovation resources. Can we do a project together? They may not have thought of you in that way. By you approaching them that way and saying, you are one of our most important customers. We care about you. We want to bring some extra resources to this relationship. That's how you start driving a different experience. And that's how you retain them, by coming to them. Whenever we go out and we do interviews of our clients' customers, when we ask them, who's your best vendor? It's often not even a competitor or client. It's somebody in different spaces. This is somebody who thinks about our needs and comes to us with solutions and works with us for joint benefit. You can't do that for everybody. That's the benefit of having the segmentation scheme. You choose that 5% where you can go to battle with them, and you say, we're going to give you our best people. We'll maybe give you a different account structure, maybe a different service structure, but we're going to create a differentiated approach towards you as one of our best customers. And that's how you start flipping the surveys. But what we've seen actually is that when you do this, you start out with your least important customers. I hate to say that, but they are. Give the best scores. What we find is that actually everybody's scores go up. Now theirs go up a bit, but the most important ones go up way further. But all boats rise by being very deliberate about, here is the experience you're going to create. This is the service model you're going to get. And in today, you're probably not setting clear expectations. This exercise forces you to be very deliberate about, this is what the experience you're going to get is, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable to it.
So I'm going to summarize you. So you first said we want to identify who the best customers are, that top tier, and creating multiple different tiers underneath that. And then use it as an opportunity to learn from the best and just really identify how their experience is going with the organization. And then the third thing is to act against this, literally creating a better experience for your customers, engaging creating and acting upon that experiences and getting it better. Is that correct?
That's the right model. Yep. And so it takes a very deliberate approach, but it's been shown to have dramatic improvements for not just you, but your customers too.
Do you see this happening regularly in other organizations?
No. And that's the problem. And that's the clear call to action right now, is that you are going to have less resources coming up right here. It's going to happen to us all. And so it takes the time to figure out who your best customers are and do everything you can to hold on to them, to take those even scarcer resources and target them where they're going to have the biggest bang for the buck. If you can't add any resources, at least you don't remove them from your best customers. But it's better if you can reallocate to really say, we are going to take this 5% of customers who generate most of our profitability, and we're going to hold on to them.
Speaking of resources, who do you think would lead the segmentation in this whole effort? What organizations and what parts of the organization need to be involved to create this, to have this going forward?
There's no one right. I mean, you could say the CEO, but outside of that, you need to have leadership certainly bought on as part of this. Most commonly, we see customer experience, if it exists, or marketing as leading this effort. One of the first things you'll find is that there often are segmentation schemes in different parts of the company that are unlinked. Sales will have a certain segmentation scheme that they use for giving pricing. Marketing may have another one. They've segmented differently for their communication. Operations may not have one, or maybe have a completely different one. And so it's important to get the whole company on one. And so you work across there to say, first of all, let's create a scheme. Let's work with sales and marketing to identify who our most important customers are, bring in finance as part of that conversation. And so it's why it's often marketing leading this. From there now, as we start going to talk to customers, again, marketing is really good. Customer experience even better, but marketing is really good at getting out there to visit customers, putting together the talking points. Don't just give this to market research. Do not outsource this activity. A big part of the benefit is having your leaders meeting with customers one-on-one. So make sure they're going out there. And then as you get further out, now you want to start bringing in finance and operations. Now, it's great if you include them in the interviews, but involve them to say, okay, what levers do we have to pull? How do we create this differentiated experience for our best customers? And so by the time you're done, you've involved most of the company, but you're doing it, deciding and dividing the right groups at the right times.
I can see this being a start. Like if an organization doesn't have a CX program at this point, I can see it being a jump start to creating that program.
Definitely is. And customer experience is the group who should be driving this. It doesn't always happen, but that's the right place for us to be, to have the thought about who are the best customers and to help drive action against that. So if it's not in marketing, customer experience is the best place. All that often reports to marketing.
Makes sense. If let's say you're listening to this interview right now and you're not a leader, you really don't think that you have the influence to make this change, what can you do?
Well, I'd start with trying to find the leader, and the VP of marketing is probably the right place to start. It doesn't have to be, it could be sales, could be operations, but typically a VP of marketing is a great place to start because that's somebody who's very attuned to customers, hopefully has retention as one of his or her KPIs. And so you can tie it to what's important to that person, as well as somebody with influence throughout the organization. That's the most common place to start, but it doesn't have to be there. Could be chief sales officer, chief revenue officer, chief commercialization officer, different places there, but I would start with marketing.
Makes sense. Well, is there any last thoughts that you'd like to lead us off with after the end of this interview?
You bet. And it's really, segmentation is important, but only as an enabler. It's all about the action. You have to also involve change management here because you're asking your employees to treat some customers differently than others. And that will be hard to change the behavior, but it absolutely pays. And as we find, not only do your best customers get a better experience, actually everybody does. Because now by doing this, you take the time to define this is what your experience will be, and then you hold your teams accountable to delivering it.
Thank you so much, Jim, for today, for the interview. And we thank you very much also for allowing us to be a part of the SMB Summit today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us directly, heartofthecustomer.com, myself, Janita, and Jim Tincher. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that was way better.
Yeah.